And welcome back to Top 10 Things That Definitely Have a Name, but if pressed to ask, you might not quite be able to say what it's called, even though it's something that is relatively common and you use quite a lot. Coming in hot at number 10, we've got... this thing. Enough of that, that's not what the video's about. This is my review for Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, the book that I've been reading for the better part of this year. Got it right here with me. Now, I've read some of John Gwynne's work before. I've read Malice before. I don't think I got round to reviewing it on the channel, but I think I mentioned it in one of my TBR videos. And I did like Malice, but I wouldn't say that I loved it. I found it a bit slow. I'd also come off of just like a real hot streak of full-on S-tier reading, and I found Malice maybe more of an A or a B, so it took the wind out of the sails a little bit for me. Not to say that it was bad, I did still enjoy it. I do hope to continue that series at some point, but I'm in no rush to. That's where I sit with Malice. The Bloodsworn saga is the next series that John Gwynne has written, this being the first book in that series. And while I liked Malice but didn't love it, this I did not like. I did love. We're gonna get married in the spring. Shadow of the Gods is set in a heavily Norse-inspired fantasy world where there used to be gods all over the joint. Gigantic creatures, wolves, cats, bears.
Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my!
However, there was a big battle between gods and mortals, and the gods fell, and the world now continues after their demise. There's like cities built into the bones of the gods' skeletons, and secret factions that still worship them in some way, or shape, or form. That is the world that we find ourselves in, and I am enthralled by this world. I absolutely love the whole concept behind it. The scope is magnificently written, a very sort of creative setting. I mean, there's been plenty of Norse-inspired fantasy before, but particularly the bones of the gods that still loom over the lands that remain. That literally it is people who are living in the shadows of the gods. We've got a very striking cover and title combo here, and the book does live up to the expectations set by both. In terms of characters, we've got three main POV characters. We've got Varg, an escaped slave trying to find the people who murdered his sister. Elvar, who is part of a warband chasing fame, fortune, all of the glory of war. And we've got Orca, who is a retired warrior now living with her husband and her son, trying to find some peace. But maybe this book has other plans. Varg was definitely my favourite of the three main characters here. His storyline got going pretty much from the get-go. I was invested, I knew his story, his character, what kind of ride we were in for with him, and I was ready to go all in on page one with Varg. He ends up becoming part of essentially a pirate group called the Bloodsworn, and so I suppose it's fair to say he's the main character, considering the name of this series is the Bloodsworn saga. I'm not sure if it's going to be a trilogy and stop there, or if it's going to keep going, because the Malice one, that had a few more than three, if I recall correctly. But no, yes, absolutely loved Varg. He, I think, had the most consistent storyline. It was enthralling, it was compelling, I cared about his character from day one, as I said. The other two I did take a little while to warm up to. First Orca and then Elvar. That was my ranking of them when I began. Orca always felt like her chapters were on the verge of something happening but didn't quite get there. There was sort of a hint of a bit more to her character, but she seemed to be trying to get away from that part of herself. And it isn't until a certain event transpires in the book that really kicks her into gear, and we sort of, or at least from my perspective as a reader, got a better grasp of what her storyline and role in this book was going to be. Elvar, as I mentioned, didn't really care for at the start of the book at all. We meet her and she is a part of this war band, this warriors group who are sailing on the seas, and they are slave traders, essentially. They are finding this particular person who is wanted, kidnapping him and selling him for money. Not a great moral standing. If you want my opinion on slavery, I'm against it, and you can quote me on that. But we did get a bit more sense of the fantasy nature of this world. Some fights with some trolls and some other little magical hints here and there. That was compelling for me, but it wasn't really until I'd say about halfway through the book we end up meeting Elvar's family, and that was a real turning point with me for her. Suddenly, after meeting her family and getting to understand a little bit more about her, I became a lot more invested in her character and her storyline. There's another thing that happens that sort of kicks her storyline into a particular direction, which is very exciting. Really sweeps you up in the adventure of it. But no, yes, after we meet her family, that sort of gave a little bit of extra depth to Elvar that I didn't think was there in the first half. So I'm glad that we got that, because then that was the point that I started caring about her as a character in this book. In addition, there's a lot of fun supporting characters for all three of our mains, but I do think, again, the ones that I enjoyed reading the most were the ones in Varg's chapters, particular friends that he makes in the Bloodsworn and their dynamics with each other and the way they all interact. I liked their camaraderie. I found them a little bit more developed than some of the other supporting characters. Some of the characters, for an example, Elvar's chapters, I found myself going, oh, that guy, who's that guy again?
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Perhaps not as memorable as to their character or their relationship with the other characters. However, safe to say that by the end of the book, I had come around on all three characters and I am now very invested in their storylines and what is going on with them. I think Varg is still number one for me. Varg is still my guy. And then, I don't know, Elvar and Orca, they're about even, I think, maybe. I might even give Elvar the edge. As I said, the thing with her family, given her a lot more depth. Although I will say, and no spoilers here, but there is something that we find out about Orca on, I think, pretty much the last page of the book that might give a little bit of extra depth to her as we continue into the next books in this series. All of that is to say, I really liked the character work in this book. However, I did find it a little slow off the mark in some places, and some of the supporting characters were not quite as distinctive as some of the other ones. A particular favourite for me was Svik, who becomes a friend and confidant for Varg after he joins the Bloodsworn. Svik is already an established member and he sort of welcomes Varg with open arms and shows him the ropes, and I like the relationship between those two. I enjoyed Svik's sense of humour as well, thought he was great, always had a bit of a smile when he was on page. Going back to the world building for a second, I'm very glad that this book really embraces the fantasy genre. Some fantasy books you read and it feels like almost like they're afraid to be fantasy, like all of the fantastical elements are really subdued and it may as well just be medieval Europe. There's like whispers about dragons and gods, but it's like, oh, it's whispers, it's rumours, it's not quite confirmed. I much prefer this sort of thing where the fantasy elements are just out there in the open. There do be creatures in this world, these little animals and spirits, little dragony things with wings. There's this kind of centipede guy who ends up having a surprising amount of importance to play in the story later on in the book. There are giant trolls, there are blood magic rituals that happen. It's not a case that the gods all died and took the magic with them. Magic is prevalent throughout this world and I am here for it. This is wholehearted, unabashed fantasy and that is what I like. Embrace those elements, let it feel otherworldly, let it feel magical. I think I already mentioned, but just to reiterate, I liked the way that the fallen gods sort of haunt the narrative in the book, or haunt the world itself. There are multiple towns and cities that are built into or overshadowed by the literal skeletons of fallen gods, and that is just a really cool visual to imagine. I like as well, certain characters can feel a certain a certain presence that these bones generate. There is still not life in them, but there is still a certain energy that they contain. The overwhelming power that these gods once had is still felt by characters when they get close to them. The action as well in this book, there's a lot of action, a lot of fights that go on. Across the board, all the fights, all the action in this book was really well written, really compelling. I very much enjoyed that aspect of it. Another aspect that I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed was John Gwynn's commitment to using the letter F. That letter is scattered throughout this book. I did have to find myself looking up a few pronunciation guides as I made my way through it, but pretty much once I got the gist, it was good. Didn't really know that letter before I read this book or what it was called, so you learn something as well. So to summarize, overall I thoroughly enjoyed this book, a really good, compelling read. I'm glad that I really sort of forced myself to keep going with it and get back into the swing of reading, because particularly I think the second half really kicked into gear. I mean, it was already good, but the second half kicked it up a level. Thoroughly enjoyed Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I already have Hunger of the Gods, and I am looking forward to cracking that one open. And I believe the third book is coming out in October, so I think I may have struck gold with my timing on this. And hopefully this is not going to be a repeat of when I thought the same thing about the Gentleman Bastard series, because I saw on Amazon that the Thorn of Emberlin had been listed as to be released in October of the year that I read them. That didn't happen. Will it ever? We may never know. Anyway, this video is not about that. This video is about Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, which gets a big thumbs up for me. If you like Norse stuff, if you like fantasy stuff, if you just like a good book, then check out Shadow of the Gods. I do recommend it. If you already have read this book, then please let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave a like on it. And if you want to see more from me, then do feel free to hit that subscribe button. I was looking at my analytics the other day, and I did notice the vast majority of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel, so if you've watched a few and you think, hey, this is alright, why not? Press it. See, what's the worst that can happen? That's it from me today, so thank you all so much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you in my next one.